Do you want to know how to mix some drum and bass to be very, very loud, yet also dynamic and punchy? My name is Alex Subhuman, and I'm here with United Pop Melbourne. Today, we're going to conclude my drum and bass track series. We've made everything from the drums to the drop, the breakdown, the build, and even a pretty questionable pre-drop vocal. Today, we're going to take a look at mixing the track, and I'm going to do it just using Ableton stock effects. That's right, no fancy plugins. Now, don't get me wrong, I myself, when I'm doing this professionally, do use quite a variety of plugins. But that doesn't mean that you need them to achieve a good result. So I'm going to show you what I would do if I was just using the stock Ableton plugins. So those of you that don't have a plethora of fancy and expensive plugins can follow along at home. My name is Alex Subhuman, and I'm here today to take you through a mixdown. Let's get to mixing. Whee! The plan here today is that we're going to do some mixing with just Ableton stock effects, stock plugins. Well, not plugins, because you're not plugging nothing in. All right, so the first way that I approach a mixdown is I check out the session, which we've been doing a lot of. Please ignore this one. This is just for recording purposes only, so I don't blow your ears up, but everything to the left side of that is what we're going to be working with. Here's my glue compressor, which has been used to build the session, so we're just going to chuck that off, and what we'll do is we'll go through and make sure our groups are correct. The more you can keep things into a group, the better time you'll have. All right, now we're all cleaned up. Let's take a look.
All bangers, all the time.
Lovely. All right, so first thing we need to do is work on our drums. It's always a really good place to start. So this will be our snare. This is the kick. These two will form a kick and snare group. This is how I run my sessions. Kick and snare. That's hat, hat, more hats, and breaks. Okay, kick and snare group. Give it a solo. All right, that's not too bad. So, in terms of what I want to do, so I don't want anything too crazy in that kick. Now, we could have a discussion all day long about what type of EQ I might use down here and is it going to cause phase, but let's just not bother. Do I want bass down there? I think the bigger problem is having too much bass beneath, say, 20 Hertz than to worry about which type of EQ you're using. Probably linear phase is a great idea, but sometimes that can mess up the transients. So sometimes not linear phase is good. End of the day, does it sound good to you? What you've done, do it, undo it, have a listen. Moving on. Just taking off some of the sub bass to the kick because there is going to be, after we've mixed this, plenty of sub bass, hopefully. We can actually just chuck that onto the kick, to be fair. Because I'm probably going to want to take away a bit more of the snare. About there, nothing too crazy. And then within that group, cool. I'm going to want to, well, actually, from the production session, we've got some compression on here, but I just want to do a bit of clipping. Now, there's not a dedicated clipper in the Ableton effects, so what we'll do is we'll slap on the saturator, and we'll just leave all of this off and activate the soft clipping. As you can see over here, it's spin out to these ones. Here's our kick and snare group. The kick itself isn't too bad, just under, but the snare, all those transients are spiking up, 3.6. So if I just slap on this soft clip, you see we're cutting off those additional transients. Now, I've covered this in my dedicated clipping video. If you haven't watched that yet, go check it out, because I explain it to you in more detail. But effectively, there's transients. We can chop them off with a clipper. It's not going to change the way it sounds too much to our ears. But it will free up a lot of our peak headroom. What's the difference between peak and RMS? Go look at my other video. Stop asking me questions I've already covered. Wow. So that's like in our snare group. That's what I'll do for now. Let's wait till later on to add any more effects if needed. Next thing is the hats. There's a lot of peak information here. I don't think we even need to do that, but let's just leave it there to be safe. We'll make sure there's no naughty low frequencies. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. Leave it as is. Breaks. EQ. Just take off that bass. Put the kick back in. What I'm trying to work out is there going to be a build-up of this punchy 170 hertz? There's probably plenty in the kick. Where's that? That's 100 hertz in the kick. That's quite a lot, so we could probably just do without, maybe. It's going to keep it sounding a bit more cleaner, and that will actually leave that 100-ish hertz free for us to add that into the synths, because it's going to sound nice and full in the synths later. But can we add more highs in? Just a note, everything I'm doing now, I'm thinking it's drum and bass. It needs to be loud, punchy, and stupidly bright. So we're going to add some more treble in. About there for now. We'll clip that up. Again, you'll see a lot of the same stuff kind of happening. That's not really making much difference. That's fine. We don't want to clip too much anyway. Don't worry about it. All right, now in the overall drums group, we've got everything running through a little bit of glue compressor and some more soft clipping. Happy with this movement. Happy with the soft clip as well. Let's chuck this EQ this side of the glue compressor. If I was to remove the soft clipping, let's have a look at the peaks over here. So you can hear the transient on the it sounds nicer, and that's the thing. It will sound nicer without it. You don't get to just clip it off for free, right? But we're making an educated decision. We're making a decision here to sacrifice a little bit of that nicer transient information for loudness. End of the day, this is a club track. It needs to be played stupidly loud in the club environment, and a little bit of saturation, distortion from clipping is going to probably help it in the long run. This isn't something you should go into your high fidelity home cinema to listen to on some $15,000 speakers and complain there's no transient information. Give it a clip. So it's a little bit worse off from the lack of transients that have been clipped, but it's not that much worse considering how much more peak information we have saved. We're going way above 6 without that. With it, that's going to help our mix gel together much, much better. That's it. That's my drums prepared, ready to rumble. When I'm finished, I'll turn the group off and I'll chuck it all down to negative. I'll drop the faders. Next one, drop synths. Now, I remember from last week when I was going over it and I felt that there was a little bit of sub missing. Check the EQ and wow, there really is not much sub in these. Switch back out to the other view. Let's just get rid of stuff that's not in. Best to keep your sessions clean. Beautiful. All right, so the drops are mixed of this chord stab and the hit, which will group because these happen together. This will be the hit. And then we have pre-drop, yucky sounds, in yucky sounds. These are Reese's. This is the one I want. This is the lead. So leads, keep yourself organized and you'll thank yourself later on. I'm actually going to take the sub out of this group. Or am I? We'll see. I think I will. It's normally a good idea too. And probably the Reese as well, because that comes with the bass. So we'll chuck them out here. These become a new group called subs. Subs group, you don't really want to do too much to. If I need it to be louder, I will just turn it up. Right? Not too hard. Reese group, same thing. I may EQ that later, but we'll leave that as is. Turn you off, drop the fader. Next one, back to the drops in. Okay, first group, hit group. This is just these two sounds. Whop. Let's do a little bit of compression. I don't want the release too fast on that because it might go boom boom, right? I want it to kind of go boom, be compressed and hold a bit with the reverb, so longer release. Excellent. We'll EQ the group as well. So I'm going to have to think about this sub hit. We'll see. We'll just drop it a little bit like this. Because you want the hit to hit nicely, but remember, everything is about relationships and context. So if the first hit is boom with a big sub hit, that's going to feel great, but then the next sound that comes afterwards might be less impactful. So if that first hit comes in with a little bit less sub, then the next sound that comes in with the sub is going to feel bigger. Part of mixing is just about creating these different relationships and different contexts of the sound. It's not that hard to make everything sound super big and full, but then everything gets very boring and then that impact is dropped very quickly. So that's just what I'm thinking ahead of time. Leave that alone for now. We're probably going to have to add some highs back in later, but we'll drop you down. Pre-drop doesn't really need much. That's fine. We'll turn you off. Alien sounds. Right, there's lots of these. Ooh. That's the lead actually, so that needs to cut out of that and that needs to go into leads. Back to alien sounds. EQ, let's have a listen. Let's have a look and a listen. A little bit of compression, which is not that one. A bit of, why can't I find it? Dynamics, compression. So I'm not really looking to compress it as such. This is more like a general volume control for the group, because that one's quite loud. There we go. And we'll soft clip. Get around 2 dB. Cool. That's enough for now. I feel like I need more highs than those, but we'll come to that later. Might be doing some multiband. Leads. Bump, 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 bump. Now, I'm under the understanding that the sub is doing both. Bum, 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 bum. Hello? Let's just freeze that up. Okay, I am going to give you a freeze because you've been very naughty. When you freeze something and you want to process it again, you can just give it a group. Sub freeze. Free, and then now I can add the processing to the group. Genius. All right, back off, please. So yes, I was correct in the sense that I have sub running throughout there. So I really do not need these subs in any of this stuff. So drop it off about 75 is a good place to start. Cool. We're going to do some group compression to these. Dynamics, glue compressor. All right, we're getting a little bit more consistency across the board there. I'm also going to chuck on some multiband dynamics, and we're going to use probably the most ugly looking multiband that's ever been invented. When I first started using this, I was like, what is happening here? But it is essentially time is your time related activities, so attack and releases. This is anything beneath, which would be a bit more of an expander, and then above is what we want to do for compression. Yeah. So we can go anything above a certain amount gets brought down by the ratio which is underneath it. A little bit of high-end multiband is good to keep the high-end in check. Tiny bit in the middle. Let's raise the threshold here. Just making sure there's kind of like a limit now to the as bright as any of those synths can be. So we're kind of smoothing out the discrepancies in brightness between our different drop synths. Let's not do too much there. And then this has got some stuff there, and we'll come back to that later. Off. We've got the Reese here. That's by itself. That can just be chilling. Yeah, that's fine. Drop U. Really gross should be in Alien Sounds. I'm not sure why you're not. We'll bang that back on again. Alien Sounds. Where's the really gross? Pretty cool. We'll just do another one here at 22 Hertz. Another low cut. Or a high pass, I should say. Drop. Off. Reese is done. FX is probably just really just compress quite heavily. Glue compressor. Make sure there's nothing naughty down in the low end. 22. Faster, so slower release. Bring it up.
All bangers, all the time.
Lovely. Off you go. Off you go. Vocal sample. These two.
All bangers, all the time. All bangers, all the time. All bangers, all the time. All bangers, all the time.
Cool. A bit more highs than that for sure. Drop that off. Vocal sample. We're just going to, again, we're going to do some glue compression. Slap on an EQ. Get rid of that naughty low end from the vocals. Don't need it. Faster attack, slower release. So, drop you off, turn you off, give it a little save, go get a coffee, go get some water, go walk your dog, whatever you got to do, just refresh your ears a little bit. I don't have such a luxury, but I suggest you do. We are now going to start building up our track. We'll actually have a glue compressor already, but I'll build it up from scratch for you right now. So I always will start with the glue compressor. We're mixing into a glue compressor to bring out the volume. What am I talking about? Go check out my How Does X Artist Make Their Song So Loud. This is the technique. We're mixing into a compressor, which is bringing in our volume. My general settings will be to take away any compression, not let the compressor look beneath 100 Hertz. I want a very slow attack to allow my transients through. It's not so much that I'm going to allow them to pass through the compressor, but I don't want them to be triggering the compressor. They're still going to get lobbed off with my soft clipping and limiting afterwards. But I don't want those transients to trigger my compression. Fast release, and I usually start around -5. Look to get at least 2 dB of gain added. And that's it. That's how I'm mixing. That really is it. We are then going to add our drums in, okay? So let's start with the kick and snare. Oh dear, what have I done? Turn all that off. Kick comes back on again. Snare comes back on again. Kick and snare on. Bring it down. Bring this one up. And I'm basically pushing this up. I'm looking for a few things here. There's my EQ after, so you guys can see the frequencies. Around about 12 is a pretty solid spot for your bass to be. 10, I should say, on my threshold. Push that up. And you can see around about here, we're triggering that 12 dB line. So this is the sub of the kick that's hitting this point. If you want your kicks to thump in a club or be relative to any other professionally done track, you're going to want your drums to hit around this line in the low end. It's a good rule of thumb. Don't ever think about, oh, that has to happen, because every song is different. But if your drums are lacking in the bass and you see that your drums are hitting down here, turn them up to hit around here and you'll have a better time. Okay, so this is a pretty solid spot for my drums for the time being, off my kick and snare. A tiny bit less because they're going to have a lot of sub in this track. We'll bring in our hats now, turn it down and up. I'm going to want to hear the transients of those hats relative to the snare's transient. At this point, the hats are louder than the snare's transient, so we'll go back down again. Pretty much about there. Now we'll mix in the break. Again, making sure that the kick and the snare are still punching through with enough volume at the break to hear it. So we'll go too loud. See, at this volume, it's just pure breaks. There's no kick and snare. So we'll go back down again. Now there's too much kick. Back up a tiny bit. Around here. Off. Maybe a touch less. We'll see how we go. Excellent. Now let's bring in the sub. The same rule applies to that 12 dB line, but you want to go a little bit higher up for the sub if you want a big, big naughty sub. And this is where I think a lot of people get themselves tied up. Subs, as long as you're playing it consistently, the only way to make it louder is just turn the volume up and down. You don't need to do all kinds of crazy processing. Give it a solo, play. We need to go a few dB louder, so let's go -2. You could probably go a tiny bit, even up to 0 actually. Oh, cool, cool, cool. Play with the drums. Hello? The drums actually need to come up a little bit. Yeah. Better. I've gone one less of the sub because I actually think they sound better around about the same impact. Doesn't sound quite right having the kick less. But that's sounding nice and full down in the low end. Now, I'm very happy with that. I think that's something that was missing in the production version. Drop synths. We are going to start with the hit. Bang. You'll start noticing now that a lot of our sounds are missing the high that they need. So we'll start bringing that in. Always make sure that we're bringing it up to a point that it feels loud to us, but the drums aren't losing their impact. So I'll go higher. It's too loud. One down. One more down. Let's try that. Way more highs. going to make more sense once the leads come in, which we'll do now. A bit less. No, it's pretty good. Alien sounds. Next one. Now, in mono, there is actually quite a big difference between the volume of those different sounds. But I know that these are much more stereo. These are much more wider. So let's bang off mono for a second just to see how that sounds, because I suspect that those more stereo sounds will jump up in volume. Remember that it's okay to have a discrepancy between the volume of wide sounds in stereo and in mono. What you don't want is when you collapse the track into mono, you completely lose the sound, right? It should stay somewhat relative. Remember that if you're going to go super wide, that is a choice that sacrifices mono strength. Same with clipping sounds. It's a choice. You're always taking something away to gain something. Just make sure what you've gained is worth what you've taken away. So that sound is way too loud now. So we can afford to drop you a bit. Let's drop you by 2. Even more. Interesting, the difference back to mono. Still got a lot more highs overall. It's just way louder. Alright, so the sub of the Reese is good, but there's too much highs probably, so we'll chuck on another EQ. This one is way too quiet. Way too quiet. Let's bring you up. Check it in stereo. Yeah, a lot of stereo going on there. So what we need to do here is a little bit more complicated because it's too quiet for me in mono. I like it in stereo, but it's not going to be listened to in stereo at all places. So what we actually need, stereo. Still has a bit more volume, so what we're going to do, go into EQ8, slap that on, and we're going to change it over to M-S, which is mid and side mode. What that does is it enables you to EQ the mid signal and the side signal separately. That's not the same as mono and stereo. It's a similar concept, but it's not. When things are mono, it's left and right collapsed into one. Mid and side is what you would hear down the middle versus what you hear pushed out into the sides, making it stereo. So it's kind of like the difference between left and right is the sides, and then what is the same signal in the middle is mono. I think that's pretty much right. Might need to get some help with explaining that one. We have lost volume in mono, so the mid signal isn't strong enough. There's too much signal in the sides, which makes it sound nice and loud in stereo because it's a difference between left and right, but the middle part is not loud enough, the part that's the same in left and right. So we need to boost that. Let's boost that in the lovely audible, our most sensitive parts, which is here. Turn it off. Right, so it's bringing that middle part brighter. Now, if we go out into mono, off, on, solo, right? It doesn't drastically change the way things sound in the stereo mix, but when we collapse into mono, it's going to help its presence. Let's turn up one as well. Cool.